and welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching TV, the news, social media, the perception given to people is wrong, and my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, and go through, as opposed to creating expectation of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guest, but it is their chance to express their opinion and their stories. And here today, we are going to talk about coming out, and we've got Jonathan Hines with us. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, Sophie. It's great to talk to you again. It's been about a year, hasn't it?
I know, it's been a long time. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Right. I'm Jonathan Hines. I'm 38 years old. I'm a Sagittarian through and through. Born in Bournemouth on the south coast of England. I've spent 3 or 4 years in London as well. I'm a huge Francophile, which, speaking to you, you've got virtually no French accent left. You've been here, I know, about 20 years. But I've always felt, apart from Bournemouth, which is very precious to me, it's my hometown. Apart from Bournemouth, I've always felt more at home in your country, in France, than I do in the UK. But you probably feel the same way.
Yes,
about
this
France,
is more home.
You feel more at home here.
Yeah. So how? Sorry, carry on.
And I'm a blogger, online radio station entrepreneur, and a TV presenter.
Okay.
And I do production as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the privilege to be able to do a few interviews in France as well on the radio, and my first TV one recently, which is exhilarating.
Fair enough. So, can you tell us how you found out that you were gay?
Now, this is going back a bit now. It's quite a while. Well, I was trying to convince myself, or trying to be bisexual, if you like, until I was 22. Mm-hmm. At 22, I met a guy that I hadn't seen since primary school. Mm-hmm. So I met him again, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, bumped into him in a gay bar, and obviously fell in love. And it was at that point, because of what I felt for this guy, it was at that point where I thought, no more bisexuality. Who are you kidding? You're 95% gay, and that's it. And most people knew by this point anyway, because I'd been kind of half trying to tell people for a while. Mm-hmm. I was trying to convince myself up until that point that I was going to marry a woman, because I'm very comfortable with men and women, gay or straight. I was trying to convince myself that I was going to get married, and that this wife would be very understanding, and that she would allow me to have a man on the side. Well, not even on the side, but as part of the relationship, which sounds a little bit insane, doesn't it? But that was what I was visualizing, this kind of ideal, very understanding situation.
And why do you think you were trying to conform, as it were, so much?
I never had a problem with homosexuality, even as a teenager. I never believed it to be wrong or bad. Never. I always had a very deep conviction that it was natural for some people. So I never had any problem with that, and I didn't have too much embarrassment about telling people. Mm-hmm. But because I had a lot of female friends, and I had a kind of romantic attraction to probably 3 or 4 different girls, in my teens and early 20s, I suppose I liked the idea of having a girlfriend and the romantic side. But what I wasn't fully honest with myself about was that I didn't have any any physical attraction, really, any physical desire for women. But I was very fond of many different women. You know, I had many close female friends, and also I had, you know, this idea in my mind that I wanted to be a father.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that's probably, in a very long-winded answer, that's probably why I tried to kid myself until I was about 22, because of wanting to be a father, and also because I had many close female friends, and I'd kind of half fallen in love with a few girls,
Mm-hmm.
never to the extent that I would
Not
fall in
like
love
that.
with a guy.
Mm.
I fell in love with a guy, it was much more intense.
Yeah. And how would you say it was received when you fully came out?
I've had a bit of a charmed life in that way, Sophie, because I know that, you know, even today, homophobia and real threat towards gay people still exists, even here in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
Northern Europe. But for me, I've been very, very fortunate in that nobody has turned against me. Nobody has been hostile. Practically everybody knows, and it's never been a problem. So
And did you
I
find
feel
it difficult
really
to tell your
privileged.
parents, for instance?
No, it was actually that they family members kind of half knew anyway, because I'd been talking about bisexuality.
Right.
Um, but I was very, very fortunate with them as well. So I feel very privileged because I'm aware of what misery some people have been through and are going through now. Even my straight male friends have been fine with me. So I've been so lucky. The only people that have been a little bit, not nasty, not rude, but have challenged me have been fundamentalist Christian
Mm-hmm.
friends I know. When you know, nice people, they haven't been rude or nasty, but they've challenged me into a debate about it because they haven't been able to accept it. But they've always been very respectful of my viewpoint on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so even with them, I haven't had any real trouble.
Which, as you say, is very lucky because so many people find it difficult to come out. What I've found is a lot of the time it's especially speaking to the families that is the hardest thing.
This is it, and I know that there are people a lot older than me that are still living double lives, still living in secret, and it must be a terrible anxiety to live with. And I think it's tragic that you've got people living like that, and the less and less that happens, the better.
And I think the thing as well, you know, especially, I mean, I interviewed other people, and you know, there was one particular gentleman who mentioned a female friend of his who was probably 50 or 60 and still hasn't come out to her family. But, you know, to a degree, I'm pretty sure the family must know, you know, because there are often clues.
I think it's a bit like maybe in China. Somebody said to me, I mean, even now, I know China's changing fast, but somebody said to me, who I know from China, he said, everybody in China knows who the gay people are. They often know who they are in the community, but you don't discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
But people know, but you just don't say anything.
Yeah.
And also they reckon, well, some statistics I read a few years ago, how you get statistics on this sort of thing, I don't know. But some 70% of gay men in China, for example, are in heterosexual marriages.
Okay.
Some 70%.
That's a massive amount.
Yeah, it is. And although we're living in a fantastic era now, things are so much better. Don't you think, Sophie, it's tragic and crazy that people have to live like that? Because what's the worry? What's the?
I know.
Why
I
are people
think
so hysterical about this subject? Why is it such a source of anxiety?
it's society. It's because, you know, it goes against the norm, and I think that, you know, we are extremely lucky in Europe, where it's probably a lot more open than even some states of America. let alone other parts of the world. But I think, in the same way, some people don't understand why you wouldn't choose to have children. And we judge you on that basis. So I think it is what is expected of you as a person, what has become the norm. And that's what people find it difficult to deal with, because to them, there is no other way. And they're very close to any other way.
It's the reproduction thing, isn't it?
I think it's not just that. I think that's because, it's an accepted fact. That's what you should do. In the next breath, who says that you should get married? I mean, I value marriage, and for me, it's something that's important and that I feel that people should do. But
when the right person comes along.
Yeah. That's my view. Yeah. It's not to say that, it's everyone's view.
No. This is it. It's, a lot of human beings, they can't, a lot of people, especially in some societies, people find it very hard to deal with opinions which are different, or people that don't agree with the majority or with the norm. People feel threatened by people who think differently or see things differently. And that's almost a primeval instinct in the human race, isn't it? That I think we're going to have to overcome. We're going to have to be able to cope with people who don't think the same way as us or don't believe the same things.
It's judgment, and it's also fear and insecurity. And, some people... So how can I put this? It's not so much we've had a privileged life in the sense that, everything has fallen under lap, but, the traditional, you get married young, you have kids, and then life happens, is not so traditional anymore, because we study for longer, because, 50 years ago, people would not really move too far away from where they were born. Where nowadays it's actually quite common to find different nationalities spread across the globe, purely because the world has evolved.
Yeah, this is it. And it is changing very, very slowly in some countries. And I think the internet, people say a lot of dark and negative things about the internet.
But it's got very good positives too.
But it's doing... people are doing great good is being done with the internet, isn't it? People are no longer
No, but we're just saying about different countries, and the internet is a way of meeting people from different countries. So even for instance, online dating for gay people is also thanks to the internet, or any kind of sexuality for that matter. Has opened up doors. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit about your journey and your relationships, please?
Well, I'm single at the moment. So far, the journey has been not good, relationships-wise, but I've always had lots of great friends, great friendships from all walks of life, male, female, gay, straight, all ages. So far on the relationship front, relationships in inverted commas, meaning romantic relationships, it hasn't been good. But who's to say? None of us know what's going to happen in 3 days' time or 3 weeks' time. That can suddenly change in ways that we can never predict. So yes, I'm open to that. But at the moment, I'm 38 now. For the first time in as long as I can remember, quite happy being, if you like, single and just having friends. And
that's actually key. That's actually key.
I'm not craving that or that person at all. I'm not craving it. I'm not obsessing over it. Maybe like I used to. For the first time in years and years and years and years, this doesn't matter. Friendships are important, and I've got many of those, and I'm very, very lucky and very blessed. I think things are a lot better now for the gay community than they were, say, when I was 21. So 21-year-olds coming onto the scene now are in a very privileged position in many ways. It's a lot easier to meet people. mobile phones, apps, the internet have brought their demons with them, their problems with them, but they've also brought many advantages, of which people of our generation, Sophie, we never had any of this when we were 21, did we? No internet, no mobiles, no apps. Well, not really, or hardly anything. So going back to 22, when I completely forgot all about the idea of women, I had an on and off relationship with a guy for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So 6 years.
Which is quite a long relationship.
Yes, on and off for most of my 20s. Yeah. And there have been, so far I haven't met, if you like,
the right person.
The one, if there is a one. Sometimes there can be more than one person. So far I haven't settled, if you like, but I'm still open to that possibility. I've had many situations where I've fallen for people who've, if you like, been not at ease with who they are.
Yeah.
But, I know what I know.
So would you say you've fallen into a pattern, or you're of attracting the same kind of people?
Yeah, the wrong ones. People with, if you like, insecurities, and people who haven't come to terms with themselves. People who are not comfortable with themselves. So therefore, as much as they may love you or like you, it can't happen in a successful way. It can't function normally. So then you've got one person who's extremely frustrated, and you've got the upset and the anger that comes with that, because myself, you can't understand why you can't just get on with it and be happy and enjoy it. Why does it have to be so complicated? But if you're falling for somebody who's maybe bisexual, or they're in the closet, or they haven't come to terms with who they are, then it can be a bit of a recipe for much anguish and difficulty. That seems to have been the situation I've found myself in, falling for people who are not ready.
Normally, when there's a pattern like this, it's either because you haven't dealt with emotional baggage of some description, or there's something in the past, as in childhood past. So just something for you to ponder on, as it were.
Yes.
So is that why you would say that the journey so far had not been so good? Because you must have learned along the way about who you are and what's important to you, what you're looking for in a person.
Yeah, and as I said, for the first time ever, I'm more interested in friends now than anything else. I'm not craving that. I'm not desperate to find somebody. I'm not eager to be in a relationship. The last one kind of relationship was 18 months ago. That was also a no-go. That was also not right. And that's the last one. That's 18 months ago. I think also, without digressing, Sophie, I think trouble is like yourself, I'm a bit of a nurturer. I want to fix people. I want to help people. I want to look after people. And then the trouble with that, that's good. But if the person you're wanting to help and fix, you're also in love with, that can bring about other scenarios which are rather unfortunate at times.
And the thing as well is sometimes people do not want to be helped. That happens too.
Or not ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would you say that in a gay relationship, there's maybe more pressure than there would be in a straight one?
Now, this is a very good question. I think some of the difficulties are the same, whether gay or straight. And I think relationships can be as volatile, whether it's in the heterosexual or in the gay world. I think a lot of gay men and women are, if you like, possibly, I can't quantify this, but possibly more insecure and more volatile than a lot of heterosexual people. So again, I'm not sure.
Because I see gay people as normally having longer and more stable relationships
Ah,
than some straight people, mainly because, some of my friends who are gay and some of the people I know, some of the people I've interviewed, I've often been in quite long-term relationships. I mean, most of the people I know who are gay, I think the shortest relationship was like 4 years. And
right.
most of them, the average, shall we call it, would be 12 to 15, sometimes longer.
Mm. Do you think that's because gay people have had to wait and fight for
Potentially, yes.
equality and for the right to be open and the right to get married, or at least uh, openly formalize their relationships for such a long time, that they are they take it much more seriously, they're more dedicated, maybe? Do you
I
think
think
that's
I'm going to
Sophie?
completely generalise here, so don't quote me on it. But from just observing, what I've
Mm,
seen is normally they literally get it out of the system, if you know what I mean.
mm,
And this is, potentially a lot of very, very short-term relationships to start off with when we first come out, and then within what I'd call a short period of time, but it depends obviously. They will settle and they kind of like, right, I've got it out of my system, I know who I am, blah blah blah. Now I'm ready. And once they've made kind of like that unconscious commitment in their own head, they kind of like ready.
mm,
I mean, I have a
yes.
friend who she was married. She had 3 kids. She has 3 kids, and I think she was 40 when she left and came out. She was with someone for a number of years. It didn't work out, but she's been with a current wife. God, it's got to be 15 years now, and it's it's
Mm,
in essence a second gay relationship.
mm. I also find that promiscuity, for want of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
sounds a very strong, serious word to use. But um, the old understanding, which goes back centuries, doesn't it, that men are not so good at being exclusive, um, whether gay or straight. And when it's men with men, there's possibly even more chance of, if you like, cheating or promiscuity, um, and the inability to keep it in your trousers, for want of a better term,
No,
than
again,
with, than
not.
with, than with, than with straight men, because some people say, oh well, heterosexual men are constrained by by women and by female sexuality, which is much more subtle and much more, if you like, sacred. Whereas when it comes to men with men, it's not so sacred, it's not so much subtle, it's more animalistic, and so more is likely to happen. So the point I was sort of in a waffly way trying to make is that most long-term gay couples, they are long-term, they've been together for a long time, they have a fantastic relationship, but they also normally, most, I find, have an open relationship.
Okay, it's interesting because I've
Yeah,
not
so they
actually
love each other
seen
to
that.
bits, and they've always been together. They may even be married, but
Mm.
they'll have an open relationship, so they allow each other at certain times to have fun with somebody else.
See, I've not seen that at all,
Ah,
which is really interesting.
maybe with the lesbian relationships, there's
No,
less of
I
that.
mean men. I don't mean
Ah,
lesbian relationships. I mean, men with men and married and or not
oh,
married even, but
they
just
haven't
having been
told you that
together
bit
a long
then.
time. Yeah, so no, I've generally not seen that at all. Actually, quite the opposite, where they make quite clear to one another that if that was to happen, that's the end.
Oh, right, with the guys
Yeah,
that you know, the
yeah,
gay couples that you
yeah,
know. Right. So maybe I'm overestimating the amount of open relationships there are.
yeah,
Mm,
potentially. Potentially, but
mm,
I think again, we are the byproduct of like our own experiences and who we know
yeah.
and people around us, and so obviously maybe a new eye opener for you to look at in a different way or challenge your own beliefs or ask people different questions or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. This is it, because there is also a lot of there's as much jealousy amongst um, gay men as there are amongst straight couples. I think that the jealousy is equally. as much. Um, ex- ex- Except, I think gay men expect maybe to be able to get away with more than what straight men expect to be able to get away with. Does that make sense?
Again, I'm not sure.
No, it's
No, I've
interesting
not.
one,
I've not
isn't it?
seen that at all.
Yeah, I feel like this is a life coaching session.
Oh, is that coming on? So, what would be your advice to someone worried about coming out?
I suppose you could say, what's the worst that can happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's you're going to be much healthier and much more relaxed once you've come out, whatever the consequences might be. And often the consequences are
Not as bad as you think.
nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing to worry about most of the time, especially these days. But I think some people maybe in their own minds, they exaggerate what the negative consequences might be. You know, how often the fear is far worse than the reality.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I've seen it as well where people have come out, it wasn't necessarily well received at all. But over time, once people have had the time to process the information, it gets better. And sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does.
And maybe I'm being naive and over optimistic, Sophie, but to me it seems that these days, most people in our society, well, certainly most people under the age of 70 anyway, are indifferent. They really don't care, which is a good thing. Maybe I'm being over optimistic, but it seems to me as if most people, I mean, judging by my experience of people's reactions to me, most people are fine with it. Most people these days don't care. Certainly people under the age of 70 anyway. But again, I don't want to be too optimistic there.
I think it does depend on upbringing. It depends on where. I mean, I can think of a few areas of France where it wouldn't necessarily be that way received. Yeah, I think it really depends.
And also, it's one thing coming out to people in general in the world, but it can be much more difficult. The reaction of a parent,
yes,
or a family member could be more intense and more, should we say, difficult than the reaction of people who are not blood related to you.
No, I agree. I do agree with that.
Maybe some people come out to other people before they come out to their family.
Yeah,
whereas other people, it might be the other way around. I don't know.
Oh no, I think you're right. I think they normally come out to their friends before they do the family. Probably, I mean, I don't know, to test the waters in a way, to see what the reaction is.
And if it's any consolation, Sophie, to anyone who's young or even older who's worried about coming out, times are much better now than they were
20 years ago. Yeah, definitely.
And they're much better than they were 20 years ago. Yeah. So the climate, you're in the best climate now for coming out than what you've ever been. So okay. That kind of softens it a bit. I don't know, because I'm privileged. I've had I've had a good experience. So I've been very fortunate.
So we're kind of getting towards the end of our time together, but before we wrap up, yeah, I know it does go quick, doesn't it? What would your advice be to people who think prejudiced? I know that you haven't experienced it, but what would your advice be?
People that are encountering prejudice.
Yeah, in that, in a gay scenario.
I would say don't react too emotionally. Don't be too defensive. Don't become, should we say, too militant, because then what you're doing is you're going on to the same level as the people that are supposed to be persecuting you. If you become hysterical, if you become militant, then you can become just as bad as the people that are discriminating against you. So I know it's hard, but to take a step back and try and have a rational, calm conversation with people about what it is they're upset about, what they don't like. Trying to keep it as rational as possible, which is very, very difficult when you feel that you're being marginalized or rejected, it's very easy to take it personally and emotionally, but often what they're rejecting is not you. They're rejecting, your sexual orientation, if that makes sense. Difficult one, but I would say to people, just don't become too militant. Don't become too defensive and too combative, because that's how so many of the problems in the world exist, because people are very reactionary and very combative, and it's kind of an eye for an eye, tit for tat.
Yeah.
If we can just try and keep our cool and have rational conversations with each other, and not necessarily to agree with each other, but to listen to each other and try and digest each other's viewpoints, then that's got to be a way forward. Not easy though, not easy at all.
No. Right, thank you so much for your time today.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. This is what it's about. It's about people having opinions. It's about sharing your story. And that's why I want it to be this way. It's about real stories, about real people in the real world. But, I can interview 1,000 people. They're all going to have a different stance on it. And that's why it's so interesting and fascinating.
And of course, we want to fight discrimination. But I think the way to fight discrimination is not by, shouting abuse at the people that are discriminating against us, and by being aggressive and militant. But it's a very, very difficult balance to get. But as we've said several times, Sophie, times are much better now than they used to be. Things are really, really evolving in a good way.
Yeah, most definitely. Right, Jonathan, that's it for today. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Sophie. You've really challenged me, because I'm not used to being interviewed.
I know. I could tell.
I was interviewed recently in France, and it's strange because I'm so used to doing the interviewing, and to actually be interviewed is so odd, and I'd like to experience it more often, actually.
Right.
Thank you. The other way around.
Yeah. If you've enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, and more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I'll have a listen to your other podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.